Social Dig, the greatest underrated late night show on the World Wide Web. I am your host, Mr. Rob G, and as always, we're going to be digging into the topics that keep you talking and the talk to keep you thinking. So come on in, kick your feet up, get an ice cold beverage, get ready to join the conversation. Yes, we are back on a late night call-in show. And we're going to go ahead and get into some good things here tonight. We're going to talk about, obviously, the things you guys want to talk about. So as we get our bandwidth and everything together here tonight, we should get a more clear screen here. Don't worry about that. I just want to definitely welcome everybody in here tonight. Let me see who has stepped here into the building. We have, going back here, let me see, I got to get to the first message. That was the first person, but that's Bomber in the building. Bomber, thanks for coming on in. Appreciate you showing on up. Who else is here? We have Linda with the heart emoji. Thank you so much for the love and support. Thanks for coming in as well. We got Fast Hemi in the building. Fast Hemi, thanks for coming on in. Appreciate you showing up. Ninja Dave 1970. Good to see all you guys. Gotta put the phone on the charger. Appreciate you coming on in, Ninja Dave 1970. Also, Christine Lynn in the building saying hi all. Hi, Christine Lynn. Thanks for showing on up. You already know T-Bone is in the building. T-Bone, appreciate you showing on up. Mr. Rob G, bonjour. Bonjour, if I'm saying it right. Bonjour all. Thanks for coming on in. Also, to Mothman in the building saying hola, Fast Hemi. Thanks for coming on in to Mothman on this late night call-in show. We're going to do it because why not? Let's see who else is here. Who else is here? Let me move through the list. Okay, we'll say her again, Bomber, because she's in the list here. We also have Paramarv in the building saying, hey, T-Bone, it's been ages since I've seen you. Winky eye emoji. Who else do we have here? Woo Riders DG, Derek Galloway. Feels like Groundhog Day. We are in the same chats, etc., over and over again. That's a family thing, Derek Galloway, and that's a good thing. And I'm so glad to see everybody here tonight. Do appreciate everyone showing on up to the show. All right, I think that's pretty close here. So remember, let me go ahead and get to this here because you already know that you can actually call in at any time. If I can get the slide up here. 856-843-3444. That's 856-THE-DIGG. We're going to give it another shot tonight. Also, I have put the message in the chat. Let me go ahead and make sure I can pin that to the top of the chat for anybody who might be coming in late here. And to make sure I can pin that to the top of the chat. Oh, okay. Yep. Feedback. All right, let me go ahead and do that here. All right, let me go ahead and do that here. All right, that is pinned. So what I wanted to do today, because it's like, why not, right? So you coming from Spaced Out Radio, talking paranormal over there. And I was like, hey, why not talk some paranormal over here? Why not? Why not continue the conversation right on over here where we're at right now? And let me make sure that we are on the right connection here. Okay, we are looking good. The image quality should clear itself up here. We have great internet on this end, so we'll see what happens. It won't stop the show. Let's go ahead and continue to get into this here. So what I wanted to do was kind of start out with, since the theme was paranormal over on SOR, let's go ahead and continue talking about a little bit of that here tonight. We're going to talk about starting out this conversation, let's talk about 15 unsolved. Let's see, 15 unsolved cases, paranormal cases, true crime cases, cold cases. I have a list here that was curated, and I kind of wanted to just go over that. That'll break the ice for us here tonight, and then we can obviously talk about whatever else you want to talk about. No big deal as we go ahead and get ready to get into this here. So let me bring a screen that allows us to do this. All right, let me see if I can get this to come up with us here. All right, so this is 15 disappearances, cold cases, and other unsolved mysteries people revealed they won't ever forget. A few weeks ago, I shared the stories behind some unsolved mysteries Reddit users couldn't stop thinking about. Number one, and I don't know, maybe some of you guys are familiar with some of these cases. Let me know in the chat as we read through a few of these. The disappearance of Brandon Swanson, and this is actually courtesy of BuzzFeed.com. So I want to make sure we give the credit. BuzzFeed.com, and this is put together by Angelica Martinez. A shout out to BuzzFeed and Angelica Martinez for this curation of events here. And it's listed here number one, the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. On May 14th, 2008, Brandon was driving home from a party and drove into a ditch. He called his parents asking for help, and they set out in their pickup truck to find him. According to Brandon's dad, Brandon was sure he knew where he was. When he got there, he was nowhere to be seen. Eventually, they all got frustrated, and Brandon decided to walk back to his friend's place. Brandon dropped his wife off at home and went back out to look for his son. He stayed on the phone with Brandon, who was trying to direct his father to where he was walking. Eventually, he told Brian to meet him at the nightclub parking lot. Suddenly, Brandon yelled, "Oh, ish," and the line went dead. They never heard from him again. Okay, all right, that's a good way to get it started. Let's see. Let's see, what else do we have? This Setagaya family murders. On December 30th, 2000, two kids and their parents were murdered in their home in Setagaya, Tokyo. The children's grandmother, Haruko, lived next door and went to check on them as they hadn't answered her calls. She found all four members of the Miyazawa family dead, the son having been strangled and the other stabbed. The creepiest part, though, is that the killer stayed in the family's home for hours after killing them. According to ABC Australia, quote, he left his DNA everywhere. He left clothes at the scene. He left the murder weapon. He used the victim's computers. He ate at least 4 ice creams from the freezer. What? Who does that? Who does that? That is a level of, and I watched this, and I'll say this real quick. I watched just the other day. There was a case of this guy. He was he was, I guess, what you would call mentally handicapped on some level, and he was a family friend though, and he was an older gentleman, and he had agreed to let one of the family friends come and stay with him, a guy that was trying to get himself together, and he allowed this person to come stay in his home, so they ended up being roommates for a little while. Well, what happened, and you may have seen this yourself, I just saw this yesterday. The younger gentleman who was allowed to come in and stay in the home, called his mother and his sister the day prior and stated that he was a little nervous because the family friend who was mentally unstable had just brought firearm into the house, and he just didn't know how to feel about that. So the family's on alert, and I guess one full day goes by without them hearing from this family member. So they put out a welfare check. They had the police go to the residence, and the police knocked on the door. The older gentleman was there, and he was just, you could tell that he wasn't fully where he was supposed to be in the moment. And the family members, the police told the family members, like, look, this is a welfare check. You guys have keys. So you guys, if you have keys, you can go in, but we can't go in. So the police advised the family members to go ahead and go in, and they kept the older gentleman, outside. And as they were looking through the house, they noticed that the family member's car was still there. The older gentleman told the police and the family that he had actually gone out camping with some friends, and he was just all over the place with his answers. First he was saying, yeah, he went out camping. Then he was saying, you know what, I don't think it's a good idea you guys are in here. And they said, we just want to check and look around for the family member. He was like, yeah, definitely, of course you want to look for your family member. And then as they were going to do that, he was like, you know what, I don't think it's a good idea that you do that. You guys may have seen this, it definitely is online. But they kept him outside. Come to find out, the family looks around the house. They look in the bedroom where the family member was supposed to be staying. Nowhere to be seen. They checked every room. Nowhere to be seen until they checked the bathroom of the older gentleman, which was his own bathroom in his room. They went in there and they found a few white trash bags covered in blood, like a few. So if you understand why there would be a few trash bags, just say they I don't know how to say this without being flagged. They had to put them back together. Let's just say that. And so they arrested the guy right there. It was so sad because the mother was there, the sister was there, and they knew that something had happened based on the mental state of the family friend. And they just knew something had happened, and they were absolutely correct. Very shocking, very traumatizing, I'm sure, for them. But moving on here, let's see. We have case number 2, the peculiar case of Pauline Picard. In April of 1922, in the small French village of Goas-Aluda, a young girl went missing from her parents' farm. Searching had proved to be futile, and eventually the family assumed she'd been kidnapped. That was until a young girl matching Pauline's description was found wandering in Cherbourg, 400 kilometers away. The family traveled there, identified the girl as Pauline, and brought her back home with them. The strange thing, though, was that the girl didn't seem to recognize the parents. When spoken to in Breton, which Pauline knew and spoke, she remained silent. Mm. Yeah, okay. I don't know if this is part of this story or not. Yeah, okay. Some of these questions, however, were answered about a month later. According to a 1922 publication by the New York Times, a farmer about a mile out from the family's town found the body of a small, naked, unclothed girl with her clothes folded neatly nearby. The body was unrecognizable, but the mother noticed the clothes were those Pauline wore the day she disappeared. Nonetheless, the discovery incited more questions than it answered. What happened to Pauline? Who unalived her? And finally, who was the girl they brought home? Wow. I don't know how much I go with that case though. I mean, come on. If you go somewhere and you look for your loved one, you find your loved one 400 kilometers away, you know this is your loved one unless there's some weird doppelganger sort of stuff going on. which maybe that's the case. I don't know. I don't know. Number three, the Voynich manuscript. And keep in mind, these are true crime cases. These are also some paranormal stuff. So I think that one falls more into that element. But number three, the Voynich manuscript, the manuscript which lives in the the rare book library at Yale, was written in the 15th to 16th century in Central Europe. It's written in a undecipherable script and assumed to be scientific or magical in nature. According to Yale, the manuscript seemingly consists of six sections: unidentified plant species, astronomical and astrological drawings, biology, which consists mostly of women with swollen stomachs, quote, immersed in or wading in fluids and oddly interacting with interconnecting tubes and capsules, nine cosmological medallions, drawing of medicinal herbs, and long pages of text thought to be recipes. And I don't know how big this is for you. I guess this is what they saw. Let me try to make this full screen here as I go through this. Okay, there we go. All right. While it's possible the manuscript is a hoax, it would be a rather elaborate one, as it was believed to have had 2 to 8 writers and taken years to complete. Though the manuscript has been handed down from many owners, including Emperor Rudolph II of Germany, the puzzle of what exactly it is or what it's saying has yet to be cracked. And once again, if you missed it, this is what was shown here. Apparently, this is the puzzle. Very intriguing. Very intriguing. Okay, number four, Lady of Dunes. On July 26, 1974, the body of a woman was found at Race Point Beach in Provincetown, Massachusetts. She was lying on a beach towel with her head on top of a pair of folded jeans and a blue bandana. The woman, who was estimated to have been anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks, was almost entirely missing her head and missing her hands. Nobody could identify her, which was strange in such a small, tightly knit town. Detectives noticed she had extensive dental work in New York, quote, New York style, and had sent out details of it to every dentist in the state, multiple dental journals and government agencies, but still nobody could identify the work or the woman. And I don't know why they have this woman circled, but they do. This was the beginning of a trend for the case. No matter what information they could gather from the woman, they came no closer to learning who she was. Her body was exhumed 3 separate times for blood samples to be taken, a bust of her face to be made, bone fragment testing, and DNA to be taken, but it all led to nowhere. Naturally, there are tons of theories as to who she was and what exactly happened to her. They range from her being unalived by serial unalivers or mobsters to her being a criminal herself. One of the most notorious theories, though, comes from Stephen King's son, who, while watching Jaws, noticed an extra who looked strikingly similar to the sketch composite of the Isdale woman. Further, in the scene, she was wearing a blue bandana and jeans, just like the ones the body was found on top of. Unfortunately, though, Universal Studios didn't have any record of the extra, and it's nonetheless still just a theory. Okay, all right. That's definitely didn't expect that to go there, but it did. This will be the extra. And oh, okay, intriguing, very intriguing. Very intriguing. Number five, the Circleville letters. From the late 70s to the mid 90s, residents of the town of Circleville, Ohio, were plagued by mysterious anonymous letters. The author of these handwritten letters accused the people of infidelity, domestic violence, embezzlement, and unaliving. For instance, the author accused a local school bus driver, Mary Gillespie, of having an affair with the school's superintendent, Gordon Massey. Mary and her husband received many threatening letters about it. In August of 1977, her husband supposedly got a call from the writer that same day, was suspiciously unalived when his car ran into a tree. The author struck again a few months later when Mary saw, quote, an obscene sign about her 13-year-old child. She noticed the box attached to the sign when she tried tearing it down, which she later learned housed a booby trapped gun ready to go off. The gun belonged to Paul Freshour, Mary's brother in law. Paul was tried and convicted for attempted unaliving. He was in prison for 10 years, specifically without being allowed pens or paper, and yet the letters kept coming. They finally stopped in 1994 when Paul was released. The author is still unknown. That's pretty strange, pretty weird as well. Number six, the Monster of Florence murders. There was a serial unaliver in Florence, Italy in the 1970s and 80s who was assumed to have unalived at least 16 people. According to CBS News, the victims were almost all couples who were stabbed or shot with the Beretta pistols. Six of the couples were unalived in their cars, with most of the unalivings having occurred during or after couples had intercourse. Some of the victims had their genitals carved out, and according to True Stories of the Monsters of Florence, one of the last known victims, Nadine Marriott, had her chest area cut off and mailed with a letter to the state prosecutor. That's pretty morbid. Let me see. Five men were accused, and one even confessed. However, another unaliving occurred while each of them was in prison. The case is still unsolved to this day, though many relatives of the victims want it reopened. That's pretty downright morbid and just God. What type of person does that? I don't know. Number seven, the Yuba County Five. On February 24, 1978, five men went to a basketball game at the University of Chico. I've been there. I've been there to that college. The five men were developmentally disabled and one had schizophrenia. On their way home, they stopped by a local store to purchase some snacks and then headed back on the 50 miles it would take them to get home. Maybe they lived in Sacramento. It's about the distance right there. Except none of them ever made it home that night. According to the Washington Post, their car was found on a deserted mountain road 70 miles from Chico. The car's tires appeared to have spun, but it was working fine and still had gas. The day the car was found, 9 inches of snow covered the mountain, making it almost impossible to search for evidence. 4 months later, once it began to thaw, the body of one of the men, Ted, was found frozen inside a deserted trailer 19 miles from the car. His shoes were missing, his wallet and money were with him, and a gold Waltham watch with the crystal missing, which did not belong to any of the men, was found at the scene. By analyzing his facial hair, it appeared that he survived in the trailer somewhere between 8 weeks to 2 months. The bodies of the two other men were found about 11 miles from the car outside on the opposite side of the road as the trailer. Various bones from the third man were found 2 days later, who was able to be identified with his teeth. The final man was not found, and it's unknown whether or not he survived. No one knows what prompted the men to leave their cars and travel so far up the mountain. I almost think I heard that story before, although I remember the details being a little different. Remember the person making it to the cabin, and then no one they assumed that the other two passed away, but they think potentially they may still be alive and that they may have actually unalived the person that they did find in the trailer. So I think that is the same story, but pretty crazy. Anyways, number eight, the death of Ivana Schmidt. In December of 2017, Ivana, 18-year-old Dutch model living in Malaysia, was found unclothed and unalived at the bottom of a high rise in Kuala Lumpur. According to the BBC, while police didn't suspect foul play, it was reported that she had gone home with millionaire Alexander Amado Johnson and his model wife Luna that night after the party. The couple claimed to be asleep at the time Ivana fell. However, Ivana's family claimed they saw marks on her neck. Her body showed signs of bruises and trauma, and the couple's DNA was found under her nails. And this is the young lady they're talking about here, Ivana. It's unclear whether her unaliving was accidental, caused by the couple, or a result of drugs and alcohol. The case was reopened in 2019 at the request of her family. And let's see, number 9, the Max Headroom signal hijacking. If anybody remembers Max Headroom, let's stop right there for a minute. You got to be of a certain age, and I will say I was a young buck, really young buck, when Max Headroom came out. So, um, and this is what Max Headroom looked like. Let me just bring this up. I'm sure anybody who remembers Max Headroom knows this image right here. That is Max Headroom. It was like virtual reality before virtual reality, if I'm even explaining that right. And I think people out there who may remember Max Headroom can agree with me. It was very new age, like futuristic is what I'm looking for. Is more of a futuristic sort of thing. So let me read this here. The Max Headroom signal hijacking. On November 22nd, 1987, the 9 o'clock news was being televised as usual on Channel 9 until the signal cut out without warning. Excuse me. It was hijacked by a person in a suit and a smiling rubber mask inspired by the character Max Headroom, jumping around to the sound of static. It lasted for about 30 seconds before the studio was able to regain control of the broadcast. But Max wasn't done. 2 hours later, on a completely different channel, Max returned. Unlike the previous one, this broadcast lasted for a minute and 20 seconds and included audio. Speaking in, quote, a voice that sounded like a cartoon villain, Max called out the sports broadcaster he'd previously interrupted and made various TV references while flailing and throwing a rubber uh, expletive. It all ended with Max bent over and a mostly off camera woman spanking his buttocks with the fly swatter. Then it returned to the episode of Doctor Who that was airing, though nothing had happened, though the FBI and FCC were on the hunt and the culprit has never been found. That's just strange. Yeah, I mean, that's just strange and very, very weird. Number 10, the Isdale woman. Okay, I think didn't they talk about this already? Let me see. I'm pretty sure we did, but I'll read this anyways. Wait, no, we'll skip that. We'll skip that one. Number 11, the mystery of the Jameson family. On October 8th, 2009, the Jameson family, Sherilyn, Bobby, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison, were seen alive for the very last time in the Oklahoma mountains. I didn't even know Oklahoma had mountains. I lived there for 2 years. It's flat as a pancake, though maybe in the southern, southeastern part, that maybe that's where the mountains are. Okay, but they were seen in the very last time in the Oklahoma mountains. They were looking at a 40-acre property on which they planned to live in a storage container they owned. The man who saw them claimed he saw no one else in the area that day. 8 days later, a group of hunters found the family's locked truck. Inside was Sherilyn's purse, Bobby's wallet, and phone, their GPS, $32,000 in cash, and the family's pet dog. According to the police, there was no sign of struggle. Despite a large scale air and ground search for the family, they were not found. Over a month later, though, local hunters discovered three partial skeletal remains deep in the woods, less than 3 miles away from where the Jameson's car was found. They were identified as those of the Jameson family. No cause of unaliving was able to be determined by the medical examiner. There are tons of theories as to what happened to the family, ranging from the elements to Bobby's father unaliving the family to being targeted by a religious cult. The theories are further fueled by strange details of the case, like an 11-page hate letter from Sherilyn to Bobby found in the car. Bobby's father was also under suspicion as his son had filed a protective order against him 6 months earlier. And finally, there were rumors of family's involvement in the occult, furthered by some graffiti found on the storage container on their property that said, quote, three cats killed to date by people in this area. Witches don't like their black cat killed. In still, though, what exactly happened to the family is a mystery. Very creepy, very spooky. Number 12, the mystery of the boy in the box. On February 15th, 1957, a boy estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old was found unalive in a box along Susquehanna Road in Philadelphia. He was wrapped in a blanket placed inside the box, which had previously housed a bassinet from J.C. Penney's that had been paid for in cash. He had scars suggesting previous surgeries, and his body showed signs of being beaten. According to the medical examiner, he passed from blows to the head, despite matching fingerprints from local hospitals, comparing him to missing children's reports and putting out thousands of flyers. The boy was never identified. Very sad, very sad. Despite DNA testing, there have been no further leads. As for the culprits, the biggest lead detectives had was a man who claimed to have seen a woman and a young boy on the side of the road sifting through their trunk. He assumed they were having car trouble, but she waved him off. Whether or not they are connected to the case is still a mystery. Just sad, man. Some people are sick, sick, very sad. 13, the unaliving of Karina Homer. She was 20-year-old Swedish au, au pair. I know I said that wrong. Who worked in Dover, Massachusetts. June 22nd, 1996, she and some friends went to Zanzibar nightclub. According to the Boston Herald, a homeless man was searching through a dumpster in Boston the next day and found her torso wrapped in the garbage bags while she was reportedly seen with some men at the club. No one knows if she left with anyone or where she went that night afterwards. The killer and the other half of her body had never been found. Yikes. Yikes. 14. The mysterious murder and haunting of room 636. On February 8th, 1965, a maid found a man standing over his bed at the Sheraton Gunter Hotel holding blood soaked sheets. He reportedly shushed the maid and carried them out of the room. According to the hotel's official blog, the man had checked in under the name Albert Knox and was seen around the property with a blonde woman. While nobody was found, police did find strands of blonde hair, nylon hose, and women's underclothing, as well as a bullet shell lodged in the wall. Police later identified Albert as Walter Emmerich, who'd snuck away to a nearby hotel under the alias Robert Ashley. Walter, however, unalived himself before the police made it to his room. The blonde woman's body was never found, nor was anyone who matched her physical description reported missing. The hotel claims that multiple hotel employees have heard strange noises, seen apparitions, and even seen, quote, unexplained figures in their photographs around the hotel in room 636 in particular. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there needs to be some level of trauma for apparitions to stick around. I'll have to ask that to the next paranormal investigator I talk to. Is that a lot of times when they talk about, in spirits or entities that haunt certain locations, there's usually a story behind it, and it's usually some traumatic tale of someone passing away on the scene, right? Or, yeah, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. Here we go. Number 15, the Bloody Benders of Labette County, Kansas. They were believed to be one of the first serial unaliver families in America. In the 1870s, the family of four ran a one room inn and sold supplies in a small town in Kansas. People began to go missing, but nothing was formally looked into until the brother of an up and coming politician, Alexander York, disappeared. In the search for his brother, York interviewed the Benders and called them, quote, odd and hostile, but didn't outright accuse them. Instead, he decided to search every home in town so as not to alert them. And so is this the 1870s? So apparently this is maybe the image of the home, or at least gives you an idea of the time period. The details after this become a bit fuzzy. After speaking to York, one source said the Bender family fled from their homes knowing they would soon be caught for their crimes. Another source claimed they seemingly abandoned their homes out of nowhere and townspeople searched it, believing they become the latest victims. Either way, the townspeople certainly weren't expecting what they found in the cabin. There was a trap door in the floor, which led to the flood soaked floor of the cellar. Between the cellar, their well, and a nearby orchard field, 11 bodies in total were found, all with their skulls smashed in. People reported seeing the parents flee to Missouri and the kids to Texas via trains, and locals occasionally reported their whereabouts. The family was never formally caught or tried. Yikes. That's the thing. Back in those times, I mean, come on, 1800s, that's why it's the Wild West, because you could pretty much do anything you wanted to do back in those times. There really wasn't anything, it was really hard to get caught for crimes like that. So you'd have to think that, when it comes to serial unalivings and things of that nature, that they had to be there's just cases that never became cases because those dots were never connected, and you just had a bunch of you know, I'm sure serial killers that were able to just do that sort of stuff without ever being noticed and go whole lifetimes without their secrets coming out. Pretty sad, very sad actually, when you think about it. But yeah, that was supposed to be. Well, it was a lot of true crime there. There was supposed to be a lot of some paranormal stuff in there, but not so much, I guess. Which is okay. All right. So that just gets the ice. That's just the icebreaker. So you have a link in the chat. You can, and it's actually posted at the top of the chat. You can click on it, come in and talk about maybe a story that you heard of. Have you heard of any spooky story? I told you about the one I just saw on YouTube, and actually I've been seeing a lot of those stories lately. That one kind of blew my mind because the one I told you about, the family friend and just going missing, and it just, it makes you think, right? Because you trust family friends, even ones that seem to be maybe a little unstable. You're like, they would never hurt a fly. We've known this person our entire lives. They would never do anything like that. Then it turns out that they do exactly something like that, or even worse. You know what I mean? And there's just it was just one of those moments that you want to trust people, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I usually do. That's how I pretty much operate. But I just thought about that situation, and I was like, what could I have foreseen that coming? Like, could I have acted if that was me and my family? Could I have reacted in a different way? Like, would I have felt the same way? Would I felt okay with letting that family member go stay over there? Um, it was really sad because you could tell when they went there, they didn't waste any time. They didn't hear from that person in 24 hours. They were already there. They were there. They were already had it in their mind that they knew what happened before they even went in that house. But it was the most shocking part of that was what they found. It wasn't like, they just found their intact loved one just passed away, but it was more gruesome than that. And I just like that part of it is the part that I don't know. I don't know how how would you handle that? I don't know if I could handle that. I don't know how I would handle that. Let's go to the chat. Let's go to the chat because I know we're hella behind here. Ah, going back to this here. I saw this earlier. Max Headroom case is classic. Ah, so you heard of that, Paramarv? I'd never heard of that case actually. I remember the show. Let's see. The Zygmunt and Damsky case is wild, Paramar. What is that one? The Zygmunt, is that one that we read or is that a separate one? Let me bring that up here. Zygmunt and Adamski. All right, let me see if I can bring that up here. All right, and I'll catch up in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and bring that case up here. I think I have it here. The Zygmunt Adamski case. Let me go ahead and move this out the way. This is recommended by T-Bone. Appreciate you, T-Bone. So let me see. It says alien abduction claims in Yorkshire. A mysterious disappearance, a body with strange burns, and an inexplicable substance that baffles scientists. Inside Out investigates the presence of paranormal activity in the death of the Yorkshire miner. And this is BBC. Say who wrote this, but courtesy to the BBC, Zygmunt Adamski, a 56-year-old miner, went missing from his home in Tinsley near Wakefield in June 1980. He had gone out to do some shopping. To Zygmunt's colleagues at Lofthouse Colliery, it was a complete mystery. Grim discovery. 5 days after he disappeared, Zygmunt's body was discovered 20 miles from his home at a coal yard in Todmorden. Zygmunt's body was lying on top of a pile of coal. He was wearing a suit, but his shirt, watch, and wallet were missing. Huh. On the back of his head, neck, and shoulders were mysterious burns, which attracted a lot of attention. Baffled, James Turnbull, the coroner who dealt with Zygmunt's death, said it's the biggest mystery of his career. The coroner was baffled because although Zygmunt had been missed for 5 days, he only had 1 day's growth of beard. He says, quote, the question of where he was before he died and what led to his death just could not be answered. James also said a strange ointment that appeared to have been used on Zygmunt's burns could not be identified by forensic scientists. Exhaustive checks failed to reveal any record of Zygmunt having been treated at any hospital during his missing 5 days. It was at this point that questions began occurring regarding to the origin of this inexplicable ointment and who applied it to Zygmunt. Alien abduction. It was not just the usual investigators, the police and coroners who were attracted to this case. One of the most famous ufologists of all time, also called Adamski, offered his own amazing theories on the tragedy. He believes aliens from outer space abducted the Yorkshire miner by mistake. The speculation of an extraterrestrial encounter was fueled by the policeman who originally found Zygmunt's body, Alan Godfrey. 6 months after finding Zygmunt's body, Alan was again on duty in Todmorden at 5 a.m. He claims he also encountered a UFO, which made headlines all over the world. Alan says, quote, I wish I'd never seen the UFO, particularly because of the effects on my children. Quote, it's not easy having a policeman as a father, but when he's a policeman who saw a UFO, it's even worse. This was a huge turning point in Alan Godfrey's life. He left the police force and has a new role as a speaker at charity fundraising events. Verdict: in the past 20 years, there has been many claimed sightings in the Pennine Hills around Todmorden. It's regarded as the Britain's UFO hotspot, but serious UFO watchers dismiss most of these Pennine sightings as just lights in the sky. The coroner is equally unconvinced about the presence of paranormal activity, although he still has a raft of unanswered questions regarding Zygmunt's death. James is opting for an earthly rather than alien explanation at present, but he does say, quote, in 50 years of time, if we discover aliens have been visiting us and we didn't know about it, then that might give an answer. But after all these years, Alan Godfrey still has doubts, leaving thoughts of the extraterrestrial in the minds of all those involved. Wow. Awesome, awesome story. Awesome story. We do appreciate that. Zygmunt Adamski case. T-Bone. Shout out to T-Bone. We give you a round of applause for that submission. All right, Tamatman, let's see. Was it in retaliation to HBO or UFO? Well, I don't know what you meant here. Magneticus, Uncle Martin had too many martinis that night. Let's see. And to respond to the Adamski case, Paramore saying, oh, yeah, could that be T-Bone? Could that be another case of aliens being less than kind to humans? And that, look, we've talked about that, and I don't know why. I love Dave, but I don't know why he keeps saying there's no UFO threat narrative. I don't know what he knows that we haven't read or seen, but there's definitely a lot of cases as proven where it doesn't turn out well for human beings that come in contact. So me and Dave will bang heads on that for a while until we come to some sort of resolution on that. But let's see. Woo Riders DG. Typically, certain cases. What does it say? Typically, certain cases and cold cases go unsolved because the agencies find out a high profile public figure was involved and then they let them go free. I can agree with that, DG. That makes a lot of sense. It's all about who you know, right? It's all about who you know and who could sweep this under the rug for you. We know that happens for sure. There's no doubt. There's no doubt at all. Um, Bomber, woo. I'm sure it's quote catchy. Video killed the radio stars. I can't stand what they got on the radio these days. I can't listen to it. It's noise pollution to me. LOL. Give me some oldies. Yep, I hear you. I hear you. Sometimes, we get stuck in certain eras and we prefer certain eras over others. I know a lot of people like that. Let's see. see what else we have here. Mm-hmm. You said George Adamski. I think that might be who they were referring to. The ufologist with the same name, I believe. Send me that link, Paramore. I'll see if I can find it. Let me race fan with the gold. Oh, you got it? Okay, you already put it in here. Let me see. Can I bring that up? Let me try something here. Let's try to Google it that way. I would play the video. Let me see if I can get away with it without. Let me see how long it is. I just don't want. You got 208,000 subscribers. I really hope you don't copyright strike this. Let me see what it sounds like.
Yes, it obviously sounds like a hoax, but
All right, so shout out to Source Brew. Source Brew, this is fair use. We're going to talk about this. We're going to make commentary with this. Don't strike this small late night showdown. We'd appreciate if you let us just play this. So we'll talk about it as it goes, but I guess this is how it starts off. Shout out to Source Brew. We'll make sure we put the link for this video in the chat after we're done here. So, but don't strike
leader,
us.
Bishop Abel Muzorewa has accepted Mr. Smith's offer to negotiate an internal settlement based on one man, one vote. But execution of all captured prisoners of war, allowing Bureau to take part in negotiations, being arrested.
what if I told you that one time back in the late 70s, an alien hijacked a British TV station for about 6 minutes? Yes, it obviously sounds like a hoax, but even so, it is a documented occurrence of a broadcast signal intrusion, and a significant one at that, happening years before the Max Headroom incident or even the Captain Midnight case. Here we have a story of one of the earliest broadcast intrusions, but also one of the most fascinating and mysterious cases, one that remains unsolved to this day as well, a much less covered and obscure hijacking, but still just as captivating. So what really happened on that station in England 45 years ago? Well, the date is November 26th, 1977. Southern Television was broadcasting in Southern England, UK. It's about 1710 UTC, or about 12:10 PM EST. A reporter from a network called ITN Independent television news named Andrew Gardner is discussing the recent conflicts at the time in the country of Rhodesia, a state that was unrecognized from 1965 to 1979, before it became what we know as Zimbabwe. Suddenly, the image became distorted. A low buzzing noise began to take over the audio, and the picture of Gardner began to wobble as a mysterious voice cut in.
This is the voice of Kumar, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the skies. We speak to you now to say the same as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course you must take to avoid the disaster which threatens your world and the beings on other worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the great awakening as the planet passes into a new age of Aquarius. The new age will be a time of great peace and evolution for your race, but only your rulers are made aware of new forces that can overshadow their judgments. Be still now, and rest, for your chance may not come again. All your weapons of evil must be removed. The time for conflict is now past, and the race of which you are a part may proceed to the higher stages of its evolution, if you show yourselves worthy to do this. You have but a short time to learn to live together in peace and goodwill. Small groups all over the planet are learning this, and exist to pass on the light of the dawning new age to you all. You are free to accept the protection teachings of those who learn to live.
Many go as wide as this. Then they run out.
Spiritual evolution. Hear now the voice of Brilon, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. Be aware also that there are many false prophets and guides at present operating on your world. They will suck your energy from you, the energy you call money, and will put it to evil ends, giving you worthless dross in return. Your inner divine self will protect you from this. You must learn to be sensitive to the voice within that can tell you what is true and what is learn to listen to the voice of truth which is within you.
It's such a
Lead yourself. This is our message.
I really appreciate that we can't I insist on the liquor full of only really choice ingredients. I can
Cats have 9 lives.
Keep on to know yourself and discover the ways of your planet Earth. The Ashtar Galactic Command thanks you for your attention. We are now leaving the planes of your existence. May you be blessed by the supreme love and truthful guidance.
And after this speech was concluded, the broadcast returned to an episode of Looney Tunes. And that was it.
Okay, shout out to the YouTube channel. I just want to give props. Source Brew. They put their commentary on that, and just want to thank you for allowing us to use that here on the show tonight. And I just kind of want to know what people feel about that. Give me ones in the chat if it's BS. Give me twos in the chat if you feel like there's something to it. One's in the chat if that was BS, or two's in the chat if you feel that was a message from the extraterrestrial presence. I'm just letting everybody put their opinions out there, and then we'll go over what people are saying out here. Christine Lynn is saying she saw that years ago. This video we just watched. Awesome. Richard Minnick is putting twos out there. So Richard Minnick is like real. Magneticus is saying, hold up. First it was some unknown network, followed by returning to syndicate cartoons. J Truth Seeker saying there actually is something to it because there's a lot more to it. Please elaborate, J Truth Seeker. I'd love to hear your opinion. Richard Minnick, the messages are true. Right. I can agree with that part of it for sure. Mothman saying, take the blinds off your eyes. Bomber saying, you'll find good nurses and some decent doctors. Okay. But they're just appeasing the entity. Okay, you were talking about something else. Let's see. Paramarv is giving threes, saying, because I can't make up my mind. Okay. Fair. Mothman, don't be a blinded horse. Okay. Richard Minnick agrees with that statement. Jay Truthseeker, I actually do know the story behind it, which begins in about 1952. Okay, I would love to give me some on that. Angels of Life, like one BS. Okay. So one for BS, two for they really reached out in that moment. Christine Lynn says, I'm undecided. At first, BS, but it is a positive message. Right. And I'll give some, even Rob G, Woo Riders DG is saying, even Rob G stated it as true multiple times. I don't know that I necessarily said that, but I'll tell you my opinion here. I just want to see how you guys feel about it. So, Mothman, we got a lot more to worry about right now. J True Seeker, hey Rob, how would you like me to call in? Easiest way is to click the link, J True Seeker, and I can bring you up and we can talk about it. Or anyone else that has something to say about what we just listened to. There is a link at the top of the chat. Let's have a conversation about it. Earth Goat Tree says one for BS. That's some BS right there. Paramar says Magneticus, it was Southern UK, probably like a small local independent station that runs syndicated show like our old UHF stations. J True Seeker, what link is that? If you look at, I don't know how your chat looks to you, but if you, I don't know what you have to do. If you look at the very top line of the chat box, you should see a pinned message that I pinned up there. If not, I'm going to put it back in the chat if you don't see it, or make it easier here. So, all right, I pinned it. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Paramore. There's Tim and Derek have a side discussion that's unrelated. Okay. All right. Oh, Earth Go Tree says, oops, I wrote the wrong number. I do not think it is BS. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. And we're current right now. So if I'm just gonna say this, and we can talk about it. And I want you guys up on stage to talk about it. But if I had to make a decision on that, if I had to make a decision on what it was that we just heard, this is where I'm at. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I don't think. I think it's BS. And here's one reason why. I don't get the extraterrestrials speaking in using our native terms in terms of the time. I don't get with that. I don't see any reason why extraterrestrials would do that. I don't. I don't see why they would make references to star systems, things that we've named in our language, in our human language, and they just happen to use those same terms. I don't see that is a possibility here. And maybe you can say, okay, they download or they tap into our database and they just know our words. Okay, I could see the argument there. Somebody will say that. Here's the second part. Are you telling me that's as clear as they could come through on a broadcast with the level of advanced technology that they have? Are you telling me that they would only be able to come in and barely kind of make it through the transmission? They should be able to knock that transmission offline and clearly broadcast anything that they wanted to say. I think we could all agree on that. I think when it comes to frequencies and transmissions, the closer you are to a source, and this is just with us, if I had the ability to broadcast on that particular frequency or station, if I had a powerful enough signal, I would knock the other signal out the way. Mines would overtake that signal. So are you saying that they don't have a strong enough signal to get through terrestrial signals or frequencies that we were using at that time? I don't see that. They traveled across vast distances to get here. Assuming that they even use those sort of frequencies, which I'm sure even if they don't normally use frequencies of that nature, that they potentially have the technology that allows them to use more primitive technology. So I could say potentially that's there, but I just don't see them barely getting the message through. Yes, the message is the positive one, and it's one that you would expect to hear, hopefully, from the extraterrestrial presence. A lot of it is true as far as what was said in the messages, and that we are definitely at a point where we need to figure this out, and all that stuff is true. But we all know that message to be true. So you could write that message just as well as I could write that same message, and say it comes from extraterrestrials, right? Now, Jay Truseeker says there's a story behind this and there's things that make it more relevant. But first of all, they have the ability to land in a schoolyard full of people. They have the ability to fly right over a city like Phoenix for an hour. They have the ability to hover over the state of New Jersey and other states for 2 months straight. They have other ways of relaying a message, and we know that the main form that they use is telepathy. So why wouldn't that be implemented somehow into this story? Why would they have to go through the type of frequency that we're using to broadcast television to deliver a message and then not have it come through that clear? That I mean, I seen stuff. I filmed stuff. You know what I have. You know the evidence that I have and the receipts that I have in regards to the phenomena. So you know I'm a believer of what's going on. I know the stuff is going on. I know it's up there. But when we go down the logic path, when we go down just using the common sense logic path, it sounds really good. It could be positioned that way. I mean, if you were going to tell a story about how they came through and they just interrupted one of our broadcasts to give us this message. For one, who's watching that broadcast? Why only that broadcast? Why not every frequency that's being used on the planet at the time? Why wouldn't it be a global approach where they are interrupting every program that's on television and making an announcement? Why would it only be that specific region? And then why would the signal be so weak and ineffective? Right? That's just the way I look at it. Just using common sense. I've never seen that video before. I've never seen it before. I'm open to anything being possible. But here's the thing within our community. If it smells like BS, you gotta call it out as BS. If there's more details to the story that make it factual or bring it more, bring it more to the factual side, I would love to hear it. I'm open to hearing it. And these are the type of conversations we should be having on that. We shouldn't just listen to something alien broadcast and then jump on board that it's authentic or real. There's what evidence do we have for that? And I think that's where we need to go with it. Let's bring Jay True Seeker on board here. Jay True
Evening.
Seeker, how are you?
Yeah, I'm actually doing really good.
Good, good, good. So
Okay,
we
so
were
you want
just
to know
I was
about
just
what's that?
yes, yes, yes. Yeah, go ahead and let us know the information. I don't know if you heard the opinion I gave, but yeah, go ahead and give the
So
backstory on that.
there's an entire history behind all of this, which
Okay.
actually technically goes all the way back to the time of the Nazi Germans back in
Okay.
like during the 20th century World War II, right? But the real history of it, in a sense, actually kind of began in 1952 with an individual by the name of excuse me for a minute. Yeah, an individual by the name of George Van Tassel. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with who he is, but anyway, he was supposedly one of the first known people to be contacted by this Ashtar Shran person, this blonde-haired Nordic, blue-eyed being or whatever, who called himself Ashtar Shran. So it happened in 1952 in a place known as Giant Rock, California. I guess that's around the Mojave Desert. The Mojave Desert of California, right? And so anyway, he was also told to build this structure that he called an integratron, which is supposed to expand the life of a person, all that. And he actually had a group together, like a group of people that got together, and they started off these UFO meetups and stuff like that. That happened in so beginning in 1952. So meanwhile, also in 1952, these same beings started making contacts with people all over the world, primarily in the US, in the UK, and also in Russia. And I guess the story behind it is that this group of extraterrestrial, they were known as the Ba'ath, so who had initially contacted individuals from Nazi Germany, going way back when, and they also had a base in this around the South Pole. So it's like a hidden underground base there. That was known as New Schwabenland. So some of you might know part of that story too. But this group of Ba'ath, there's actually two factions of it. One of the factions that existed below the Pyramid of Giza, and the other faction that existed at the South Pole. So anyway, when they started making contacts with individuals all across the United States, primarily in 1952, one of the things that they actually said to this guy, George Van Tassel, was that he was to write a letter to the US president at that time, to say that on a specific day, or actually within 3 days in the summer of that year, that there would be a UFO flyover over the Capitol building. And so this was these Ba'ath, Nordic beings, actually did this sort of like as proof to Eisenhower that the letter written by George Van Tassel is like to be confirmed as real. And the idea was, I guess the whole idea was to back in 1952, to warn that the second faction actually had plans within a 10-year period of time to instigate a nuclear war between the US and the Russians, which almost 10 years later, which almost evidently happened. I guess which eventually became known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so, so going ahead with all that, there is one of the famous individuals who also came forward with a lot of that was this individual by the name of George Adamski. And so George Adamski, turns out he wasn't the original contactee. He actually had his story from a woman that lived back east, I guess in Maryland. And that woman's name was, let's see that. Yeah, that woman's name was Madeline Rodifer. And so you might not know about her very much in the George Adamski story for those who, but she was the one who basically told her encounters accounts, her encounter UFO contacts, and had actually basically said to George Adamski she didn't want to go forward with the story. And so Adamski said, well, I'll go forward with the story and I'll just incorporate it with my own. And he did that. So George Adamski actually made models and the whole bit, and he incorporated his own story with and his own diagrams of the UFO Venusian scout ships and things like that. And in place, it actually gained a lot of popularity. And so what eventually gained a lot of popularity was when George Adamski was very popular, I guess, around this area called Mount Palomar, where there was an observatory or something like that there. And there was a UFO sighting there, and George Adamski, I remember, went up onto the mountain by himself, claimed to have had a UFO contact up there, while everybody else kind of waited down below. So even though they saw the UFO, he supposedly actually didn't have a real contact, but he actually kind of faked it, if you know what I mean. And but it was believable because it went along with what Madeline Rodifer had shared with him, and then other people at the time were starting to have contacts with these same Ba'ath group of beings too. And another guy that was well known at the time was a guy by the name of George King. And so what was kind of interesting about that is a number of the contactees that were contacted in the West, most of them actually had the name of George, like as the first name. And so anyway, the whole idea was after Eisenhower had received the letter and whatnot, and they actually witnessed these UFOs flying over the Capitol building, there was Eisenhower actually agreed to meet up with these with this particular group of extraterrestrial beings that supposedly called themselves the Ashtar Sharan, or Ashtar Command. But that wasn't the real name that he initially had given to George Van Tassel. The original name that this being had given to him was Aktara Karan. So instead of it being Ashtar Sharan, it was actually Aktara Karan. So how I kind of know a lot of this is that my original mentor who got me involved with the Sasquatches and that had actually come in contact with this Ashtar person, I guess between the years of 1980 and 1983. After 1983, Ashtar seems to have completely disappeared. But unfortunately, George Van Tassel, he didn't live very long, so I don't know if somebody did him in or not, or maybe he just died of cancer or something like that. But his integratron structure was never completed. But there was UFO meetups that happened in that area ever since. And there was a woman from his group. Her name was Thelma Terrell, who unfortunately decided to write a bunch of books about it and capitalize on the whole situation after he died. But there's another individual by the name of George Riddle, who I actually had personally talked to, who was part of George Van Tassel's original group. So he kind of shared a bunch of stuff and all that. And interestingly enough, when I told him about the Befath in relation to the back then ex-Nazi Germans, he said him and his wife just suddenly disappeared the next day. Like they totally disconnected their phone number, their website and everything, their email, everything, and they completely disappeared. Once I pointed out that there was an actual connection there, which is kind of weird in itself, even to this day, and they were never heard from again. But so you can all hear me pretty good, right?
Yep, they can hear you just great.
Okay, yeah. So part of the story actually even relates to going back to what happened in 1952, goes back to that guy known as Admiral Byrd, who supposedly goes to the South Pole, and I'm sure most of you probably know about that story about Operation High Jump and the whole bit. Well, anyway, come to find out that the being that was that actually had supposedly had gotten in contact with him was this Ashtar guy, but back then he didn't use the name Ashtar or Aktara. His original name was supposedly Erasik, and yeah, it was Erasik. And when he came in contact with Admiral Byrd, he actually read out lines from a book. I forget which book it was, but he actually read out lines from a book. Now, for whatever reason, I don't know. And Admiral Byrd had supposedly recorded all that in his diary. And so when it was found out that it was actually written in this other book previously, then that sort of debunked to a certain extent the whole Admiral Byrd story. But Erasik had actually intentionally had done that because he was supposedly hiding out from the other faction that was located under the Giza Pyramid. And so it's like these beings are not always for the benefit of humanity. So, the reason why this Ashtar group was doing this is along with the other Befath group is that they had the intentions of manipulating and controlling humanity. And one of the things that the Ashtar group did is by, I would say, messing with people's minds by creating this trans-state channeling stuff to occur with people back in 1952. Well, anyway, come to find out, during the time of Adolf Hitler and all that, his group, which was called the Thule Society, named after a city, I guess, up in Greenland, where the supposed Aryan race had supposedly originated from Greenland, according to these ETs. Well, there is a woman there by the name of Maria Orsak, and she was supposedly the first one to supposedly channel this Ashtar person. And so I guess what it was is they were aiming for world domination. And back then, I guess before the 20th century Second World War, maybe going back to the First World War, the Germans back then had a lot of insight, and there was a German group that was receiving a lot of information about how to build ET craft and things like that. Because they were to lead Earth humanity into this new age. Well, anyway, Adolf Hitler was supposed to be one of the key players of that, but Adolf Hitler went to the dark side and went to these and started falling under the influence of the Ba'ath, as opposed to this other group. I guess we would know them as Pleiadians or Pleiarn, whatever you want to call them. And so, because that happened, we could very well have acquired technology that would have taken us to the stars, going back to before World War II. But because of Adolf Hitler and this other extraterrestrial group that kind of messed that up, that was obviously not something that's going to happen, because you could say the positivities had actually prevented that from happening in order to prevent the enslavement of humanity from the eventual Nazi Germans. And so, since the whole German thing kind of failed, that's when there was this split within the Ba'ath group between Ashtar and the other guy, the other Ba'ath leader, and his name was Komogl II. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that this Ba'ath group has actually manipulated, you could say, Earth humanity, going back thousands of years, primarily through the Jewish, and also after that through the Christian religions. And which goes into a whole entire other story within itself. But the Ba'ath were eventually removed in 1978, following after that broadcast that happened in England, the original Ba'ath. But the Ashtar group actually remained until 1983, when they were finally eventually removed by an extraterrestrial group known as the Pleiadians or Pleiaren, the ones that were actually associated with Billy Meyer. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with UFO contactee Billy Meyer or not. But when I heard about that, that kind of explained why my own mentor, whose name was Stan Johnson, the guy who introduced me to the Sasquatches and things like that, that would explain why he never actually saw Ashtar either after 1983. And he said to me, contrary to how all these women suddenly started to try and channel Ashtar, he said Ashtar wasn't like that at all. He said Ashtar was a real, when he saw Ashtar personally, was a real tough guy type of person. But there's two others that actually came in contact with not Ashtar directly, but another individual that was associated with Ashtar, whose name I think was Atlan. Now, Atlan had gotten in contact with two individuals, one in the United States, and the second individual that was in Canada, who eventually became well-known figures in the UFO arena. And the one that was contacted in the U.S., his name was Daniel Fry, and the one that was contacted in Canada. Yeah, the one that was contacted in Canada, that's contacted by the very same being, his name was Wilbur Smith, so you might know something about that. And so both these individuals, one in Canada, one in the US, they were, I guess because they were highly involved with top secret programs involving UFOs and nuclear weaponry and stuff like that. That's why these individuals were actually contacted. But they were actually contacted through what I would call reality vision, meaning that these beings had the ability to manipulate our thoughts in such a way that you could actually physically see them, but it would be like a virtual reality, but broadcast directly to our minds. And that's what they did with my original mentor, Stan Johnson. So come to find out, they were the type of the beings who pretended to be our friends, but they really weren't. And so when I started hearing some more stuff from Billy Meyer, he basically mentioned, I guess in their contact report, that that the Ba'ath were essentially a criminal group from their homeworlds, from that space-time dimension where these Pleiadian beings actually originated from. So it's not like they were going to take over the Earth and destroy cities and all that. Actually, they didn't want that. This criminal group didn't want that at all. They just wanted to become. They just wanted to become the figureheads to control the Earth and to control Earth humanity. That they eventually had plans on waiting for another extraterrestrial group to attack Earth, and then they wanted to attack that group, and then they wanted to come out as the heroes. But in the process of doing so, they were going to use famous worshipped figureheads from the different religions, like say Jesus, Nanda, Muhammad, Krishna, Buddha, and all this other bit. They actually had individuals. He actually had individuals within that group to play those figureheads in order to gain the attentions of the world religions after this was happened, and they were actually going to refer to themselves as ascended masters. Well, anyway, even after Ashtar and all that were apprehended by these Pleiadian back in 1983, which is another interesting story in itself, it was interesting that there was still other people who were formerly affected by them through this very means of mind control, etc. I should say it's mind control channeling, where other people who fell into this, other people kind of fell into this channeling bandwagon. There was people out there who just desperately wanted to channel Ashtar, right? And and I noticed back in the early 1990s, this primarily involved, let's say, especially middle-aged women who just had an infatuation with this Ashtar, almost like a love infatuation with him. And so I kind of explained, well, Ashtar is gone now. And because I looked into this whole thing because I myself wanted to know who really was this Ashtar person. Because at first all I was getting was just people who were channeling them. And so this one particular woman, Thelma Terrell, who eventually renamed herself, and she called herself Tuella, and she published a bunch of books on it. And because her books became so popular, that's what eventually encouraged other people, etc., to really try and channel this being, even though he was no longer even around after 1983. But they also did that to my friend, mentor Stan Johnson. Like they actually kind of took over his mind, and he would like pass out, and then he would be speaking on behalf of this Ashtar or his second in command, who called himself Sananda. And then there was another being there that was involved with him who referred to themselves. He referred to himself as Moses, even. So it actually kind of got a little crazier. So, and there was another thing. So, my original mentor was in Oregon. Yeah, so he lived in the state of Oregon, and he lived in I think it was in the remote town of Ashland, way out in the middle of the forests and whatnot. But it also became evident that not too far from there, this Ashtar group actually attempted to manipulate two individuals by the name of Bo and Peep, or to eventually called themselves that, right? Bo and Peep. And what they wanted to try and do is they wanted those two together, a group of people together, to leave all of their possessions behind, with promise of taking them onto a UFO craft. And then these Ashtar people would go in and try and pick out through their possessions what they wanted and what they didn't. And so this actually kind of happened. And so the people that were promised to be taken off world, supposedly that never happened. So I don't know how much you know about that story. But Bo Peep eventually, unfortunately, formulated that cult. which, as you already well know, was Heaven's Gate. You probably remember that, right?
Oh yeah.
And so they were actually involved with that. And so come to find out, around that very same time, there was also other suicide cults in Europe, supposedly under the influence of this group, or this Ba'ath group. And what they would do is they would unfortunately, they would lie down in the shape of a star and light themselves on fire. I kid you not. And so it's like I say, these beings, they pretended to be our friends, but they weren't. And now I don't know how they had influence. I don't know exactly how they influenced that the BBC broadcast in England, but it was kind of interesting that a year later, after that happened, that's when the first faction of the Ba'ath were apprehended by these Pleiadians and Pleiadians, and they basically said, it came to the point where they were able to apprehend them because they actually tried to kill Billy Meyer. Because Billy Meyer was once he started writing about them, and et cetera, they actually made attempts to kill him. And what they did is they flew in a ship over his home in Switzerland, causing like a big sonic boom. And then a second UFO flew over the house just in time, with sort of like with I know, and it sounds kind of crazy, but people have witnessed it, right? But with a shield kind of like over the house, and then the other UFO from the Ba'ath creates this big sonic boom. And then after that, because it was that's when these Pleiadians were given the permission to basically take them out. And so what these Pleiadians eventually did is they not only took them out, like they went in they went and apprehended them, arrested them, but they actually took them to a dinosaur planet. And I jokingly often will say, yeah, they took them to this dinosaur planet so that, as punishment for what they've done to humanity over the past few thousand years, now they have to get eaten by T-Rex, probably for 1,000 more lifetimes, in order to finally evolve. Like, so I often, I've often joked about that over the
Awesome.
years.
So are you, I mean, because yeah, I mean, if and I'll tell you this, okay, so I know that you come to this channel and I appreciate it, and I know most people here are open-minded individuals. So would you yourself be open to potentially finding out that none of that is true?
I've my the reasons as to why I believe it was real is because there was too many people involved, and from different countries. Like there was, especially in the U.S. and especially in the U.K. and especially in Russia. And then there were some people actually in South America that were involved with this too, and primarily also in that country. Yeah, the one down, not Panama, but the other one, Costa Rica. Yeah, and so anyway, I had to talk with Wendell Stevens about all this. So I don't know if you ever became familiar with Wendell Stevens.
No, I definitely will look into him though, for sure.
So Wendell Stevens was a retired Air Force colonel who actually had his own UFO experiences, etc. And I got to know this guy personally. But he very well known, I guess, back in the 70s and back in the 80s. But he was not only friends with Billy Meyer, but he was friends with other so-called UFO contactees. And he had a big collection of, he had the biggest collection of UFO photos and film from all over the world that you could possibly imagine. And one of the things that, like I say, there's a lot more to this story. Like I only just give you a small tidbit of it. But one of the things that, for example, that they did is they actually knew. I don't know if you're familiar with uh, the story that happened from Dulce, New Mexico. What was his name? Um, just kind of slipped my mind right now. The guy who talked about the Dulce War or battle that took place there in 1978. No, actually 1979. Correction. Oh yeah. What was his name? Um, Phil Schneider. There we go. So they knew that this Phil Schneider thing was going to happen, and so Billy Meyer gave Wendell Stevens something that was to approach the Carter administration to prove that everything in the Billy Meyer context is supposed to exist and all that. And so Wendell Stevens went to the Carter administration and said, if you follow the guidelines of this extraterrestrial group, etc., you guys can actually have contact with this group by this other extraterrestrial group related to the Pleiadians by the year 1999. Actually, from 1999 to the year 2002 or 2001, 2002, we were supposed to have a big, huge contact that was supposed to happen with these extraterrestrial beings. And so we didn't really know what they were called back then. I refer to them as the Millennium ETs, like when I was reading about it back in the 1990s. But you see, Billy Meyer wasn't the only one that was told this. There was other people who were told the same thing. Like they were saying around 2001, 2002, there was supposed to be this big, huge thing where a bunch of extraterrestrials were going to reveal themselves to the general populace, beginning with the United States. Yeah, beginning with the United States, and then after that, they're going to do it with Russia, and then after that, they're going to do it with China, and so forth, providing that those countries come to agreement beforehand. But I guess they were going to do this because they were going to try and prevent what was going to happen. I guess with the Dulce conflict that happened in 1979, which was going to be a year later. And so anyway, I guess the U.S. government or the Carter administration said, no, we're not really interested in that unless they have technology that they want to share with us. We're not really interested in following your guidelines and all this. And then there's some Secret Service people who literally tried to arrest Wendell Stevens, throw him in jail under the idea that he was having sex with a minor. Because what actually happened is he was dating a 16-year-old at the time. But they already had decided they weren't going to do anything intimate with each other until after she became of age, like around the age 18, 19, like 3 years later. But they arrested Wendell Stevens on false charges, and they had him locked up for 6 months. And while he was in jail, he actually continued to write up his books on these UFO contact cases, primarily even the UFO crash that happened in New Mexico there. Not the Roswell one, but that other one there. I think it was I believe it's called Corona, New Mexico, or something like that.
So answer me this, Jay Truth Seeker, because this is what we have to find out in all of this, because there'll be different individuals who will step up, and I appreciate you for doing that tonight. But then you'll have someone else that'll also step up, and then they'll tell a totally different story
Oh, absolutely.
of events and versions. So what do we have? So when we take our data, when we take in data, which they all usually start as stories, and then we compile stories over time, we see what lines up, then we attempt to take that data, apply it to what we're seeing now to kind of get to actual answers. So do you feel like, and when I was asking earlier, would you be open? So say extraterrestrials land tomorrow morning, and then they say, Jay True Seeker, everything you said last night on Rob's show is not true. Would you be open to that?
Oh, absolutely. You see, one of the things I kind of realized, you see, I got involved in this UFO stuff, from my own personal experiences, going back to, interestingly enough, 1983. But I noticed throughout the 1990s, okay, like I used to hang out with the local UFO group in Vancouver, Canada here, right? And so, and then from there, I used to go to some of these whole life expos, as they call them, down in Seattle and whatnot, down in the U.S., just south of the border here. And I found that the people that were around at that time, like we were aware of this kind of like a mindset. Like we all knew what Roswell was. Wendell Stevens gave his talk. We all knew what Pleiadians were and things like that. But then I noticed that by the 2000s, all of a sudden those stories are changing, meaning the original Roswell story that was happening back then, all of a sudden we're hearing, oh, it's not a disc, it's a manta ray UFO. And then all of a sudden we're hearing they're not Zeta Reticuli anymore, but there's something that looks similar. You know what I mean? And so it's almost like as time goes on, the stories are slightly changing, right? And so I kind of noticed even with the so-called Ashtar group or crowd, so that people had the idea of what Ashtar was all about, say during the 1990s, especially women who claimed to channel him, even after Ashtar was already gone. I'm finding that this phenomena is more than just so it's more than just experiencing UFOs and whatnot. How do I even explain it? It's like a psychological mentality that gradually changes over time. And so that's why I kind of think that a lot of the original videos and stuff that we had back in the 80s and 90s, and even books, and even with spirituality, even with books that we had back in the late 1800s to around the turn of the century there, there was a certain way of understanding things. There was a certain spirituality. And so as we go into the decades, into like decade after decade, I noticed that the mentality of that changes. So people's way of understanding the New Age is so much different now than it was back in the 1990s. Even though there's still similarities, it's different now. You know what I mean? Like, so in my opinion, if somebody has a different understanding of this, it's I accept that, because a lot of people now don't know, or they haven't read the books and stuff that were published back then that aren't even published anymore, if I'm explaining that correctly. So like Wendell Stevens published some fantastic books back in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And those were limited editions, and those are even now hard to find. And if you do find them, they're probably worth like 2,000 and more, whatever, thousands of dollars on Amazon, eBay, etc. And because they're becoming actually quite rare. And so the UFO phenomena is something that we can't just understand overnight. It's something that we have to read about, research, and that could take 10, 20 years. And so even with as I mentioned, the Billy Meyer case, I went into studying that for 7 years before I could really understand what it was really all about, if you know what I mean, because there were so much people's opinions and there was so much disinformation around it. I wanted to really find out and experience the truth. And if that means actually going up to Switzerland and seeing the UFOs myself, then that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm
Exactly.
going to do to eventually get there, right?
And I think that's the responsible answer. I think
Yeah.
that is the responsible answer, because here's the thing. Here's the thing. If any of us had the opportunity to stand in front of the world and give our testimony under penalty of perjury, then a lot of the story that a lot of people tell would not be included because there aren't things that you could bring home as factual. You could say, I really feel strongly, or this makes sense because it lines up with this. But once we really, if we really had the consequence of facing some severe consequence for our stories not adding up, or extraterrestrials said they'll be here tomorrow to verify this, so today tell your story under penalty of perjury. To be safe, we would only go with the things that we can prove thus far,
Okay.
right? Because we can branch off so many different ways. The things we do know, like we can that I know I would testify under penalty of perjury, would be the fact that these things are in the sky, they are coming from outer space, they've landed at times, they go in and out of the ocean. At times they've landed and beings have gotten out of these objects. Beings have gotten back in these objects and taken off and gone somewhere else. But as far as like the particulars and the specifics of the story and the reasons why, I don't know that we have enough to testify to that, right? Like we could sit here and spitball and theorize, and that's fine. But when we talk about these or state things as facts, which I'm not saying that you are,
Yeah.
but I'm just talking in general to because there's so many different versions of what people feel like is currently going on, that I think what the responsible thing to do is to take it as far as we can prove.
Oh,
Because we're, like you said, we're collecting data every day. This changes all the time. Outlooks change on this. And I think, but I think it needs to be clear, because here's one of the things is that because of that fact, we have a lot of skeptics out there, not in boo on skeptics, because sometimes they're just unreasonable in the way they come into this conversation, but just for like the general public, like those people who tomorrow awaken to the fact that the craft are up there. Like, wow, I saw one. And then now they want to dig into some content to get more information. Well, some of those people will automatically cling on to certain accounts of a person's story and then take that as fact. So I think it's like more responsible for us in the community to, because of that reason, because some people will just be hearing, like someone might tune in right now and they may hear your story or your version of events and take that to the bank as all facts, right? But
yeah.
you, even yourself, you would say that they're not specifically, solidified facts, but the person coming in doesn't know that. And I think that's where we get the rap of just being believers, because you do have a certain group of people who will not even think twice about the account that you just gave and just be like, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is, and that's exactly what's happening." And I think it's just responsible for us when we're on stages and tell these stories like, "Hey, this is my theory. This is my
Okay.
opinion. This is the way I'm seeing this, and it could be wrong, it could be right, it could be, anywhere in between." But I think just as, when we're talking in front of people, that we kind of just make that clear. Because you know, I've obviously talked to a lot of different people, a lot of different accounts of what they think is going on, and they do vary. And it's just, I think the one thing when we listen to each person's account, I think the one thing that everybody can agree on are those basic bare things that we can almost prove, which are craft are in the sky, they're coming from space, they're going in the ocean, they're coming out the ocean, they're landing, they're taking people sometimes, things get out of these craft, things get back in. And those are the things that I think are the core and align with everyone's story across the board. Right.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
I just want to put that out there, because there are some people right now that may be lurking who are looking at this stuff for the first time, and they'll come in and be like, "Oh wow, that was a wild story." I don't know if I'm with that, but that's your account of it. That's how you felt. That's according to the data that you had put together yourself. That's your theory of what you think is going on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone should, you know, ride with that.
Well,
And saying that,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
one of the things I often tell people is as many times as I've personally seen UFOs up there in the sky, um, and I've even encountered beings, um, I really can't expect somebody else to accept that if they've never had the experience of even seeing a UFO in the sky or an encounter. So, and especially now that we're moving into the age of AI, things are gonna, unfortunately, in the very near future, things are gonna get really difficult in determining what's even real anymore. So, it's still there?
Yeah, I'm here with you.
Okay, good. So, so back in the 70s and the 80s, it was actually a lot easier than it is now because back then we used just regular camera film with negatives and everything, and so it was a lot easier to determine if something was real, and it was a lot harder to fake something back then. But then now, as we slowly, by the 1980, as we slowly moved into the digital age of video, etc., it became so much more harder to determine what is real. And and it's not just UFOs. It's like, as someone explained to me, even court cases of crime, where pictures don't really do it anymore. Where that's actually now getting harder and harder and harder to deal with. Yeah, so not just UFOs, but other situations too. And one of the other things that kind of really is going amok is the whole idea of conspiracy theories. I'm not saying so with conspiracy theories, it's like, okay, I'm on the fence with that because I'm open to the idea that these things happen, but it's
Hmm.
going to be so much harder to know if they really happen because of all the digital and AI and like there's just so many. So that all of a sudden there's so many more people's opinions now compared to with what I remember
Yeah,
back in the 1990s even. Um,
true.
and so because of that, the waters are just getting so murky and muddy and everything. It's like it's almost like somebody out there is intentionally doing this to us. Um, like so as we're trying to sort out, okay, these are gray extraterrestrials, these are Nordic blonde extraterrestrials, these are Sasquatches, and so forth. That's getting so much harder. Now it's like, okay, it's not just Sasquatches anymore. It's Dogman, it's Pale Crawlers, it's Janoskwas and Gogways, and 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 all of a sudden, not all of these beings are friendly towards people anymore. And now we're all of a sudden we're hearing of militarized cryptids and
Yeah, see, and that's where,
yeah,
that's the perfect example. Like when you were saying like the waters get muddied, and I totally
yeah,
agree with you. That's why I agree that for the most part we should just stick to basics when confronting this, because we will have the answers. Like we don't have to guess too much. We don't have to speculate so far out as to the type of clothing that they wear or the reason that they don't like a particular group out there. Because I think that if we have this contact moment, which I feel like we probably almost had back in the New Jersey drone sort of situation, I think the answers come at that point. So it's like, do we even need to spend time on worrying about those specifics, those small details, the small nuances, and should we just be looking at the main factors as what drives us to get to the answers? Because just like you said, I think the more versions of stories that that come out there ends up being what muddies the water. So I think it's like us. It's like we are muddying our own waters because now this new person has this different account all the way down to the details of why an extraterrestrial prefers this over that. And it's like, okay, we could speculate to the end of time, and we could even further the narrative and that story and make it all speculation because we don't know the answers. But then what does that really do for us? If we can't lock those parts of the story down to facts, if we can't, over time take certain parts of the story and then now tie them to actual factual things based on previous interactions and things that have happened, then it just ends up being something to, it's like, well, why even talk about that part of the story?
Yeah, well,
Because
yeah,
it ends up, there's no way to prove it, there's no way to disprove it, and then at the same time it just conflicts with someone else's story, and then now we're worried about who's right, who's wrong, and it takes away from the, I think, the focus. And that goes along with cryptids and everything else. It was just like you said, we were dealing with Sasquatch, we're dealing with um you know puck wedgies and all
yeah,
the list of names that you mentioned. And I don't know that we should be even diving that far into it without starting to kind of solidify some of the things that we already know, or things that are more likely to be proven than the things that don't really have things that we could attach them to. You know what I mean? It's fun to talk about,
oh,
and
yeah,
it's fun to be in a community where we can talk about those stories. But that's why I've been on this thing, because I think we should bring proof to the table whenever possible. Like, we're not going to always have proof. It's not going to be possible every time. But that's why I'm just like, hey, when we have the opportunity, let's get proof, because what that proof does is now it allows us to lock in this new part of the story that was just a story. But now that we've been able to bring receipts to the table to back that up, now we can say that part of the story is likely true. And then that's kind of how we should be moving through this, because I said, like I said, once again, I've talked to 1,000 people, and I've heard probably 50 different versions of what people are theorizing is going on, and it just gets confusing, and it doesn't allow us to be taken seriously on that major stage, because they look at it as, oh, these guys are just making up stories. There's 50 different versions of why they think extraterrestrials are here, and what they're doing, and why they're here, and who they are involved with, and the small nuances. So I think it kind of, I don't, we should keep the data, because
yeah.
if it's data that you've come across that you feel strongly about, the data should be procured and it should be kept. But we also should make sure that we find ways to vet that data and make it truth or make it not truth, and just get it out of the story.
Well,
Because otherwise, that's all we end up having is stories at the end of the day.
yeah. If I may comment here, one of the things
Yes,
I've
sir.
kind of realized with all of this, it's almost as though the phenomena itself is becoming muddied. Meaning, so like back in the 1990s, when I was having interactions with Sasquatches and things like that, now all the way up to the 2000s, etc. Um, that all of a sudden, just in the past 5 years, we're hearing of dogmen, we're hearing of pale crawlers and puckrudgies and stuff like that. But I know, I can remember from before that, it's like not a lot of that was just never even heard of it. And not only that, um, like people just weren't talking about that stuff on YouTube yet. So it's almost like the phenomena of those extra things is reemerging almost intentionally. So it's not just people with mixed opinions, but it's almost as though the phenomena itself is expanding entirely into something else. And as you gave example of these drones over New Jersey, as I was watching some of that footage, like there was drones that were taking the shapes of, let's say, airplanes, but yet the airplanes that they took the form of, they weren't quite right, meaning some of the wings were actually disproportionate to what we would see as airplanes, if you know what I mean. So it's like the tail would be slightly disproportionate to how it was supposed to be, or the wings and so forth. Or one aircraft actually ended up with like, or one drone actually ended up with like 3 wings. So almost like an AI glitch, if you know what I mean, right? Like, you know how when you have
Hmm.
these AI images, they glitch. Well, that's what these
Oh
drones were.
yeah,
That's what some of these drones were actually doing. Not all the time, but every so often, this would
yeah,
happen. Um,
I agree.
so there's a guy in my area, but in Vancouver, and he decided to tackle that situation. So he has his name is Jeff Silver. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he just
Uh,
recently what's that?
what's his name?
Jeff Silver.
Jeff Silver, I believe I've interviewed him.
I
Yeah,
haven't interviewed him yet. Dave Scott.
I think I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Jeff Silver just recently asked these UFOs to appear to him, or this one particular UFO that he says he's like friends with. And the UFO actually took on the shape of an airplane, and he films this just over Vancouver, or took on the shape of it like an airplane drone. And he basically says in his video, "You want this? You want your drone answer? Well, there you have it, right?" Meaning that some of these UFOs actually do morph into the form of aircraft or drones, etc. But what I find most surprising about all that too is when the drone phenomena was happening last Christmas, or yeah, last November, December. Nobody ever mentioned the name of a woman from the 1990s, and her name was Ellen Crystal. Well, anyway, this woman, Ellen Crystal, actually back then had actually photographed and filmed these UFOs actually transforming into airplanes. So you might want to look that up. In fact, there was a book. Yeah, she had actually published a book about it.
I have to
She's
look into it. What's her name again?
so her name was Ellen Crystal. Yeah, Ellen
Okay, I'll
Crystal.
look into her.
Yeah. So she had a book. She had a book out, and she explains these UFOs turning and disguising themselves into aircraft. Um, and I was surprised that nobody that I know of so far who's ever talked about the drones has ever mentioned her. And that was, and like I think she passed away, I think in the late 1990s. And ever since her book was published in that, and I doubt you can even find copies of it anymore, or if you can, maybe if you're lucky on Amazon or eBay or whatnot. But ever since she passed away, it's like nobody talked about it anymore. Like she was popular for a short period of time, and then that was it. And so back in the 1990s, before we had internet, we only really knew of these people through, like as I said, they called them whole life expos, and through the video VHS tape recordings and stuff that we had back then. And just so I actually had a personal friend. Her name was Dorothy Izett, who's unfortunately also passed away. But she was actually one of 4 people who were contacted by these beings in October of 1974. That I refer to this day as the benefactor light beings. And so they, all 4 of these people also had videos of, but especially Dorothy, had video made from home film movie footage of these UFOs that would appear almost every night to them. And so fortunately, before Dorothy passed away, there was a documentary that was finally made about her. That was called Capturing the Light. So you might want to look into that. I'm actually in that movie too, just very briefly though. If you're interested in that. But I learned a lot from her about these ETs and UFOs and things, and she would kind of discern, like she would give me her whole entire perspective of contacting light beings, and not all of these beings were friendly. So it's like the beings that were contacting her actually warned her against other UFOs that were actually somewhat dangerous, right? Yeah, that's the what's that one? Yeah, Silent Invasion. That's the one from I think from Ellen Crystal. Is that correct?
Yep, Ellen Crystal.
Yeah, that's a
Looks
really,
pretty interesting.
yeah. So definitely read that one. And so before that, there was like a light phenomena that would occur with this whole movie film. Like the UFOs would blink within a fraction of a second, and every time they did that, they would create these beautiful patterns and images of light, and then some of them actually depicted what the beings actually looked like. Yeah, that's the one capturing the light, and she lived
Yeah,
great.
you said you appeared in that momentarily in that
Yeah,
documentary.
yeah, you can see me if you watch that video. I'm actually sitting in the planetarium, and I'm the guy wearing the hat over to the left side. But
Okay, we'll have to do that.
and they put in there a recording of me talking just very briefly, right? And so
Awesome.
you'll still hear my voice in one segment of it too. But yeah,
Awesome.
she was a good friend of mine all the way up until she passed away in around 2013. And fortunately, she put together presentations, but they were all localized to Vancouver. She never went. She never felt comfortable with going out to these um, like whole life expos and things like that, because Dorothy Isaac was unfortunately harassed by people who would call her up and say, "Hey, we're part of the Order of the Light, and we need you in Hawaii to unlock a mountain." So she was actually being harassed by these UFO cults.
Bluetooth
Excuse me.
disconnected. Bluetooth connected.
Oh, what happened there?
Yeah, that was my
Okay.
tablet here. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was unfortunately harassed by these like UFO cults and stuff like that, saying, "Oh, you have to go to Hawaii and unlock a mountain," and et cetera, et cetera. So she unfortunately became very reclusive as a result of that. But like I say, she was one of 4 people who was contacted in 19 October of 1974. And what's actually kind of interesting about that is it kind of I don't know if you're familiar with a group called the Unarians or the Unaris Academy of Science.
You didn't know.
Okay, so there's a group in El Cajon, California, that was started by this guy who was actually supposedly contacted by ETs around age 13 back around the early 1900s. I guess it was around 1902, or no, was it 19? No, it wouldn't have been. It would have been around 1915, I think it was. He was contacted. He was only about 13 years old. Anyway, I guess him and his family immigrated to California from England, and his parents were actually electrical engineers or scientists. And so he was really inspired to work with electronics and things like that. And he was eventually contacted at the age of 13. And interestingly enough, the beings who had contacted him at age 13, there was a parallel encounter that also took place in Argentina of another guy very much like him who was also contacted supposedly by these same beings. But anyway, he eventually got involved with the I guess the spiritualist church later on in life, and after his first marriage failed, he eventually meets this other woman at a psychic fair, and her name was Ruth. And so this guy's name was Ernest Norman, I think it was. Was it? Yeah, Ernest Norman. So he marries this woman, and he was more of a technical person. Ruth was more of a sectarian. So Ruth Norman was yeah, she was a hypnotherapist, but she was more into the sectarian part of it. But I guess he probably kind of was too, because he was involved with the spiritualist church. Now, the reason why I'm kind of bringing that up is because, as you say, based on personal's opinions, I notice if somebody still has a lot of belief structures from a religion or from a sectarian organization, to a certain extent, that could potentially cloud a person's understanding of the UFO experience, right? But what was interesting about these couples is that when they were contacted by beings again, they were also told that there would be that UFOs would open up contact with humanity beginning in the U.S. Around, I guess, from around 1999 to around 2002, but most specifically around 2001. And they were actually told that this is going to happen long after your lives have expired, meaning after they've passed on. And so since Ernest Norman's life was coming to an end by the early 1970s, just before he died, they said, yeah, we're going to make an open contact with various people 2 years from now in 1974. And now what's actually kind of interesting about that is that the people who were contacted, they had absolutely nothing to do with the Unarian group or this Unarian society in El Cajon. In fact, Ruth, who was his wife, who continued to live on after he passed away, she thought she was going to be contacted in 1974. And I guess it never happened. But the people who were contacted were primarily these 4 individuals, and possibly even others too. But primarily these 4 individuals, and unfortunately they're all passed away too. Like Dorothy Izett, I can name them. There was Dorothy Izett and a guy by the name of Ralph Meany, who was simply a race car driver, actually very well-known race car driver from the early 1970s. And then there was a woman on the East Coast, I'm just trying to remember her name. And then there was another guy who knew her, whose name was Paul Koslewski. And so the woman on the East Coast, I'm just trying to remember what her name was now. Oh yeah, it was Stella Lansing, that's right. And so there was a specific psychiatrist guy or whatever who investigated Stella Lansing. And there was another guy who investigated Dorothy Izett, and from which they to examine their film footage and like home movie footage, and also their recordings and things like that. And what's so interesting is that these 2 individuals hadn't met each other. Like one was on the East Coast and one's on the West Coast, almost exactly. These 2 women, and actually the guys too. Like there's one guy that was on the East Coast and one guy that was on the West Coast. And so they had their film and recordings and stuff examined, and the results for both of them on each coast was pretty much was coming out identical. And the 2 people who investigated them were, to my surprise, were strikingly very similar to each other too. And so I'm kind of thinking to myself, what is the coincidence of that, right? It was almost like there's an intelligence there that intentionally made that happen. And so Dorothy Izett eventually had asked these beings, and she was filming them almost every night using her husband's movie camera, and which is like Super 8, by the way. And she asks them, so what's my purpose in all of this? And they basically said, well, since you're open to the idea of our existence, we just want you to film our UFOs, and when you feel ready, show it to the world. And that's exactly what she did. In some of the frames of films, she actually managed to get redeveloped as pictures. And so
awesome.
Dorothy Izett especially became very well known on this TV series that was happening in the 1990s, like unsolved mysteries sightings. And there was another one. There was another one. I'm just trying to remember the name of it, like UFO Paranormal or something like that. So she was, and so in the early 1990s, she was gaining a lot of popularity, and she had scientists coming from all over the world. And one particular individual who really took a liking to her, evidently, is a guy by the name of Stephen Greer. And supposedly she was the inspiration for Stephen Greer and the path. Excuse me. Yeah, Stephen Greer and the path that he took. Well, he was supposedly inspired by Dorothy to go ahead with that. And so Stephen Greer only talked about her only at the very beginning, and after that, I didn't really hear from him talking about it anymore. And when I actually tried to meet up with Stephen Greer and talk with him on 3 different occasions, unfortunately, Stephen Greer was the type of person to absolutely avoid everyone. So in other words, from his point of view, if you weren't high profile, like if you weren't a celebrity or if you weren't a government official, then they're not worth talking to. Like that was just.
Yep. Hit that unmute for me.
Yeah, that would happen automatically, right, if you start coughing.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a mute on/off button right here too.
Okay,
So
good.
I'm gonna cough. Go. There, I hope that works. It's just you get the switch every so often. So what was that? I heard
I said that's the beauty of the mute button. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it can do the air horn thing, right? Okay. So so it doesn't. So why does it create that sound?
No, I said that I played that on my own. I was
Oh, you
saying
did that.
that's the beauty. Yeah, that's the beauty of the mute button. Yeah.
Okay, right on. And so I'm assuming you're using StreamYard, correct?
No, this is a different program. It's a different program.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
very similar though. Oh, and by the way, I'm really glad to finally get a chance to talk with you personally.
Man, that same here, J True Figure. I see you all the time. That's the thing that I say about this show. If for me, what it does is I get the same people I get to see in the chat. I get to meet and have conversations with, and that I think that's awesome because it adds a whole nother dimension to you. So now going forward, when I see you in the chat, I recall the conversation we had, and I have a visual. And
Yeah.
same thing for everybody else out there. I don't know if they've ever seen you before.
No, I have you on Facebook and all that, and I've been actually meaning to contact you for a very long time.
Yeah. I'm glad you stepped forward. It's awesome to hear new voices, hear new perspectives, and you're very open to speaking, which I think is awesome as well. So I'm really hoping that you do this more often.
Oh yeah, I've also been on Dave's show last summer. I don't know if you've seen it or not. And the name
No,
of
I
the
got to look that up.
oh, you didn't see that? And yeah, you can find it on my Facebook too. I posted up there in my newsfeed.
What
But
name did you go under for the show?
so on the show, I went under the name of James Alexander.
Oh, okay. I think I might recall that then. Yeah, the
So
name is
that's the name that
familiar. Yeah.
yeah, that's the name that he had for me, right?
Okay.
And because I didn't want to use my real name because unfortunately up here in Canada I had a stalker,
Ah.
somebody who was into Sasquatches, and that's another story in itself. That's kind of a
Well,
little scary. What's that?
yeah, we'll have to get into that. That's why I even hate using Mr. Rob G, because obviously it means my name is Rob, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I even hated going down that road. So I totally understand what you mean by that.
Well, that was something that happened about 13 years ago. And it was interesting because it's like the Sasquatches warned me of this guy, right? Like I was going to actually hang out with him and his friends, and then the Sasquatches warned me that these guys had a trap for me, right? And then when I told the guy when I told the guy, well, you know, I'm going to have the Sasquatches invisible beside me once we meet up in the park there, all of a sudden he dropped me like a hot potato. And it didn't.
Well,
I know it didn't make any sense because it's like this guy wants to meet and communicate with Sasquatches, and I'm saying, well, you know, I can have them walk invisible right beside me because I've gotten to know them like to that point. And so when
that's
I
pretty
told,
intimidating.
yeah, I guess so. And so when I told him that I'm going to have them with me for my own protection, he didn't talk to me again. And then the Sasquatches mentioned, well, the reason why he wanted me out there is because he wanted me to communicate with him in regards to a lost gold mine out in that area. So I didn't know anything about a lost gold mine, and then I talked to a friend of mine on the phone at the time, and he said, "Oh, you must be talking about the legend of the lost Slumac gold mine. I think that's how or Sluvac. It was either Sluvac or no Slumac. That's right. There's a guy by the name of Peter Slumac in his lost gold mine, and so I didn't know anything
Okay.
about that, right? And just the fact that the Sasquatch has actually communicated that to me even before hearing about it, I think was
Well,
absolutely phenomenal.
we'll have to do that. What I'll do is I'll set a
Yeah.
show on Sasquatch, or we'll do an late night show, and we'll specifically cover the subject of Sasquatch. Because I don't think I've done that much. I don't have experience with Sasquatch, so I have opinions on Sasquatch as well. And like I said, I think it's also falls in the bucket of like what we're dealing with extraterrestrials. I just feel like we I just approach it the same way, and the reason why is just because what I'm tired of, and I say this because I can see how the skeptics look at us from the outside, and I just want us to be looked at in the best light possible, and to be taken and to have all of our claims taken seriously,
Oh,
like all
absolutely.
of us, every single person. But the way that that's done, I think we have to approach it a certain way in order for that to be the case. Because, as I said before, I think for sure there are, well, we know for sure that there are a portion of individuals in our community that are just blatantly not telling the truth about the stories that they're telling. We know that. We
Oh,
know that
absolutely.
there are experiencers that have experiences that may seem, kind of wild and off the charts, but they are true. So the problem is that we get mixed up with the people who are blatantly not telling the truth. And I think we have to find a way to kind of separate ourselves or approach the topic a different way. And that's kind of what I'm dealing with now, is just trying to figure out a way, because I talk to people, I can look at people in the face and tell, like, okay, this person is being authentic. Like, you can tell this person is really giving an account of something that happened. Like, this really happened to this person. Then you have people that you can tell are just really blatantly not telling the truth at all. And I'm just trying to find a way to separate the two, because the people that aren't telling the truth at all are people who should be confined to areas like science fiction, which is cool and okay, because there is a place for science fiction. There's a
Oh,
place
definitely.
for just stories, but that needs to be separated from the actual accounts and experiences that we are all having, because we are all also looking for answers to why these things are happening. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the way that I'm trying to go about this. So I don't know
Um,
if you have an opinion on that.
oh yeah, for definitely. If ever we get a chance to meet, I would love to go in the woods and let's say with a group of us, whatever,
I'm,
and we can make contact with Sasquatches. I've actually done that with two women friends of mine, and
I'm with
we
that.
actually went into an area, a park here called Golden Years, and not only did we come in contact with Sasquatches, they actually showed us where a portal was. But when they made contact with us, they were invisible, meaning because they feel comfortable around that, well, especially in a public park. If you want to see them more of what they actually look like, you'd probably have to go more deeper into the woods for that. But like where I've had these beings coming to me invisible, and they actually tap you on the shoulder. Not only that, when you hear a thump, 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 and so one of the there's another park I often visited periodically by myself, or if I'm explaining that correctly, meaning on and off for so many days. When they came to me invisible, and I would be walking across the bridge there on the path, and you can actually hear them walking on the bridge beside me, like thump, 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 and the bridge is shaking, right? And then sometimes they'll actually communicate with me verbally. And what I mean by verbally is that they have a sound like you can hear them like with a hoo like type of sound, right? And they have a chattery sound, and so what I used to do is I used to go and meditate with them, and this and so when you're communicating with them through this so-called mind speak, what it is that you actually feel their thoughts, so you can see it visually in your mind, but you also feel it, if that makes any sense. And
Yeah.
so there's nothing to say that other people can't have those experiences too. And so, like you say, when somebody's skeptical and so forth, I notice with skeptical people usually have a bit of an insecurity about them. So they have this almost like an inferiority complex. And so they want to feel superior. They want to like over other people. And so the easiest way for them to do that is say, oh, that's a bunch of baloney, or this is a bunch of baloney, etc. And that's all they really do. They just they can either go up on a podium and say, oh, this is a bunch of baloney, and they'll actually make up a story. Like I know this one skeptic by the name of Cal Korff, who made up a story about the Patterson-Gimlin film, saying, he goes and says, I talked to the sheriff who faked, yeah, who faked the incident by wearing a gorilla suit and all this other bit. And of course, we know that was that. We find out later that that whole story that he came up with was actually completely false. But he was just trying to make a name for himself, so he goes around making these fake claims to prove his skeptical point of view. So yeah, sometimes you get people who may claim UFO encounters that may not be real, but you also get it on the other side too with these skeptics, or like that Jim
True.
guy, right?
True. So let's do this. Let's do this because I'm gonna go ahead and get ready to wrap up for tonight.
Oh yeah,
And I think what I'll do is I'll do a show again tomorrow night. So we'll do another late night call-in show, and then we can pick up
where
with
we left off.
skeptics.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I would. It'd be awesome if you join the conversation for that as well. And because there's a lot of places we can go with that, and I'm sure that might even open up some of the other viewers out there who want to talk about skeptics, so we can get 3, 4, 5 people on stage to kind of talk about that at the same time. And I'm definitely going to take you up on the Bigfoot thing. I know I talked to Brown Dwarf. I don't know where Brown Dwarf is. Haven't seen him in a while, but he had agreed to do the same thing. But I would not naturally be found in the woods,
yeah.
to start with. So the chance of me coming across Sasquatch is going to be very slim to none. So I would need to go out with someone who is as, knows what they're doing in that aspect. So
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
definitely open to that with you, Jay Truth Seeker. So we'll do that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow.
Okay, well, I'm going up to see Dave in that later on in May to actually kind of help with that up there too.
Oh,
Like
with
Dave was talking.
the project he's working on.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually go up around Victoria Day weekend for Canada. Like we call it Victoria Day weekend up here, right? And to introduce somebody to Sasquatch, I wouldn't be taking them 30 miles into the woods and going it like that. No, that would be too much for people. I would, you can do it just from 15 feet away from the parking lot. And when they come in
Yeah.
invisible, um, that's what works best for people. It's like they come in invisible and you can hear them walking on the ground around you. And then I explain, well, what I would do is I would explain how to connect with them through the mind, meaning you just relax, feel at calm, feel at peace. And when these beings respond, they'll send you a feeling of unconditional love. Once
Well,
they
I'm
realize
looking
that
forward
you're
to it.
yeah. So I'll
You
talk to you more
see,
about that too when
yeah, we'll do that, and then because like I said, anything that I've experienced, I brought to the table. I've been lucky enough to be in a position to bring receipts, and that's why that's something that I really feel strongly about, and I would love to be able to bring. Because I'm looking around in the Bigfoot world, and I'll just leave it with this. And I'm waiting for receipts from the Bigfoot world.
oh, absolutely.
And maybe, maybe I'm the one to do that. I don't know. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people out there that have these encounters. I know that if I have an encounter, I know if I go with you out into the woods to go try to have this interaction, I am personally going to be prepared to capture that data and then be able to bring something back to say, look, guys, look what we encountered, or at least a sound or
Yeah.
something that we can go ahead and at least apply to the whole thing and say, look, these things are out there.
Oh,
That's the
absolutely.
goal. It should be to move the needle forward and to get us to where, to get us closer to the answers on all these things that we have questions about.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you, Jay True Seeker, and let's do this tomorrow night, same
Okay,
time.
sounds good. And at some
All
point in the
right.
future, we'll have a game of air hockey, shall we, when they meet again? Yeah, exactly.
We'll do that too, Jay True Seeker. Appreciate you coming up. It was a pleasure talking to you tonight, and awesome meeting you too for the first time.
Uh,
So I know that tomorrow will be a great conversation. So until then, thanks for coming up. Let me give you your round of applause for being awesome to me.
you're
Mm,
most welcome.
You have a great rest of your night. We'll talk tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yep, we'll see you then.
Jay True Seeker, guys. Jay True Seeker, guys. Once again, a round of applause. It takes a lot to come up on stage and talk about things and share the stories, but that's another thing that we definitely want to be cognizant of is and that's why I asked Jay True Seeker, like, are you, we have theories and ideas. We all sit down and think about this stuff all the time. We know what the baseline facts are regarding the phenomena, and then we know where, things that we've heard and places that this takes us, and just being open to having your whole world shifted or changed is key in this thing here. So regardless on what you feel or what you believe right now, if you're presented evidence tomorrow that contradicts everything that you've come up with and known, you have to be open to that, because that's the only way that we can make sure that we move forward, right? We can't be stuck in one place and not be open to other things being possible. Awesome for Jay Truseeger to step up and tell his story about what he thinks is going on here, and then just being open to being absolutely incorrect at the end of the day if we find out that things are different. I think everyone should be the same way in their approach to the phenomena, because at the end of the day, we can speculate all we want, but what do we really know? And I think that's where we get down to the end of it here. So Bomber did state 100% agree, Robbie Sweets. Truth versus creepypasta. There needs to be a line drawn. And it's facts. It's facts 101 as far as this goes, because stories will only get you so far. You have to at some point be able to validate some of those stories. They all start with stories. And that's why I don't have a problem with stories, because everything starts with a story. But then once you have enough stories that line up, that begins to be your background data. And then now you can start proving things, because you can almost account for certain things to happen based on stories or data that you've captured in the past. But once again, I think, it's up on all of us, whenever stage we're on, that when we're telling, if you're going to go further than the truth, the things we can prove, that you should preface the things you say with, this is what I believe, this is how I feel, this is my theory on this. That way, the people that are just coming in aren't feeling like you're speaking as if what you're saying is fact. Because I think we can all agree at the end of the day, no one knows the answers. So if you come across and you don't preface it with that, you may be coming across unknowingly, actually, sometimes you may be coming across as, these are facts, right? And then that's where you run into the issues, because someone's going to approach you and say, how do you know any of that is factual, right? So it just, we need to be more responsible in the community on how we present ourselves. This is how we reshape and remold the way that us in this community are looked at from the outside. I think it's very important to me, because I consider myself as part of this community, and I don't like the way that we are viewed from the outside. I don't like it, and there has to be a way to change it. The stories that are just stories, people who are just telling plain stories, there is a whole lane for you called science fiction. You can take those same stories that you've created or made up and turn those into books or movies. Those do big business out there, right? Everyone is into a good science fiction novel. They're into a good science fiction movie, and there is a lane for that, right? It just isn't in this lane where we are trying to find truth about something that is actually happening to people out here in this world, right? Two separate things. And I think we can do that. We will continue to do that as well right here on this channel, because that's what we do. That's what we do. And I just want to thank everybody for coming on out. I know there's probably some lurkers out there who are coming here for the first time. And I just want to make sure that you guys know that this is the approach here, right? So, I'm tired of hearing the thing that UFO community are all believers. They're believers. No, we're not. We are actually individuals that have experiences that are looking for answers. And I think skeptics are doing the same thing. Open-minded skeptics are doing the exact same thing. They may not have had the experiences, but they're still invested in the subject, and they are also looking for answers. And we're looking for the same answers, guys. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap this thing up. It has been awesome. Once again, I always find these late night shows productive. We will continue to do these here because we've always done them, and I think it's something that actually moves the needle. So once again, I want to thank everybody who has come in here. Let me go ahead and run through the chat. Obviously, I want to thank Jay Truthseeker for stepping on stage. So once again, thank you for sharing tonight. Definitely want to thank, I'm going through the chat here too, so I want to thank everyone that came. Bomber, I want to thank Lovey Love. I want to thank Bomber. I want to thank Deb from Sacramento who came in just a moment ago. Appreciate you. I want to thank Magneticus Attractus, my day one guy right there, man. Straight up. Polly Rotterman. Man, thank you so much for coming in, Polly. Much love. All the way from California. All the way to Israel, where you're at right now. Much love. Stay safe out there as well. Also want to thank, let's see, who else? We got Bomber. We got Mike Bothwell snuck in here. Hey, Mike Bothwell, thanks for coming in. Appreciate you showing on up. We have as well, let's see, who else did we have? Well, I know we had Tamothman come in earlier, so shout out to Tamothman. We had Christine Lynn as well. Thanks for coming in. We also had, who else did we have? We had Flat Six who just showed up. I appreciate you saying, I'm working at home today and I've got a few hours before I got to get started. I'm going to get some sleep. So make sure you rewatch the show when you can, Flat Six. It was awesome. Jay Truthseeker stepped on stage. It was an awesome time. Polly Rotterman perfectly said, Robbie G. Man, thank you so much, Polly. Thank you. Who else is out here? Paramarvelous. That's what we call him, Paramarvelous. Thank you so much for coming on in here tonight as well. Angels Are Life, Nikki, thank you so much for showing up here. Poncho Zork, oh my gosh, long time. Thanks for coming on in. Glad to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for coming on in tonight. Who else did we have as well? Who else did we have? Let me scroll back. We had a lot in the chat. Chat was active tonight, which is awesome. Just want to make sure we don't miss anybody. I did say to Mothman, Christine Lynn. Did I say Dr. Love? Let me make sure I say Dr. Love. Dr. Love, thank you for coming on in, being a part of the show tonight. Appreciate you as well. Bim Jim, who came on the other couple episodes back. Thanks for coming in, Bim Jim. Thanks for showing your love in the chat as well. Let's see, who else did we have? Moving back through the list. That might be it. Let me go back a little earlier. As far as those that were in the chat, I know there are some lurkers out there as well. So shout out to lurkers. Oh, Presidential Zaddy definitely stepped in the building. So President Zaddy, thanks for coming in as well. Let's see. Desiree White, thank you for coming on in. Along with Woo Riders DG, also Marco Video, thanks for coming on in. We do appreciate you. Also, as you guys know, the phone number to call here is 856-843-3444. That's 856-THE-DIGG. It's a 24-hour line. If you're outside the United States, dial 001 first, then 856-843-3444 or 001-856-THE-DIGG. It's been a pleasure hanging out with y'all tonight on the late night calling show at the Social Dig. I'm your host, Mr. Rob G. You guys have a great rest of your night, and I will see you. Let's do this again tomorrow. How about that? All right. Take care. Welcome to the Social Shop, courtesy of the Social Dig. I am Mr. Rob G, and we are bringing you exclusive gear, and tonight's no different. We have Humanity t-shirts, the positive progression of humanity. Yes, you can go out into the world and proudly show everyone what humanity means to you. $32.99. And remember, if you're a social soldier, you get an additional 20% off the price. That's right. Being a social soldier gets you an additional 20% off. And keep in mind, depending where you are in the world, shipping fees and taxes will be applied. Bringing you exclusive gear right here at the Social Shop on the Social Dig. All right, guys. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and shut this thing down. Anybody out there, if you're new, you might be lurking, you might be new out there. If you are, please consider coming back. We have real great shows here. We have the Definitive UFO News Show, which we run. We have the Social Dig as well, which I'm setting things up for that. We have this show, which you've come in on, which is the late night calling show. We also have my experience with the phenomena. So make sure you guys hit the notification bell and that subscription button. That would be awesome to see you back here next time. With that being said, you guys enjoy the rest of your night, and I will see you soon. Take care.